Sabrina. Thanks so much for choosing to do a natal chart reading with me today. And it's sort of a semi-natal chart because we're going to go into some transits and we're going to go into your progress chart. We're going to go into a couple of things because looking at your chart right off the bat, I can probably predict like exactly when you'll get married or exactly when you'll meet somebody, because you definitely have some signs coming up showing that that is a possibility, and that is very likely to happen. So I'm wanting to do that as well. And I saw relationship was your main concern. So I'll focus on that as well as the natal chart. And then if I just see anything else that sticks out, like career, finances, anything like that, I will just make a note of it. So yeah, the first part of this, we'll just go ahead and go over your chart and just want to make sure I get a good grasp on this. Sorry, I'm just moving things around. Don't mind me. Okay. So we did talk already, because it's a solar return chart, that you have a high amount of fire and water and a low amount of air, and that you have a lot of fixed energy and you're pretty balanced with the mutable and cardinal. So you like to stay pretty consistent with things, and that you are definitely led by being inspired or emotionally. So a lot of things need to have that level of processing for you in order for you to want to commit and put in that long-lasting effort into things. So, and we did talk about how you are a Taurus rising, Sagittarius sun, and then you do have Leo moon down here in the 5th. So expression and creativity, using your imagination, delving into deep philosophical issues that many people may not touch, or you may find yourself intrigued by the things that are dark and misunderstood, the things that others don't talk about. So you may not be somebody that's really into like mainstream. You just may not find a whole lot of relevancy there or a whole lot of intrigue. But a lot of that can be masked, all this fire energy, and the Scorpio can sometimes be masked by this Taurus rising. So it's definitely interesting to, get an idea of how you're presented and then how all this energy is working within your chart. Again, you don't really have a specific chart pattern. I believe that you have a locomotive with the moon as the caboose. So again, a lot of things are going to sort of filter between Saturn and the moon for you in your life. So whenever you are, and it says wanting to sow something, create something, initiate, whenever you're wanting to get in that mode, Saturn is the one that's going to lead. And then when you're feeling stuck or unsure, or like your energy is running out, you'll typically go to this moon in Leo of being inspired by a dream, or getting really creative, or finding some fun or some pleasure in life, warmth and closeness and family. So family might be a big motivator for you in life. So we'll go ahead and I'll just go through what is basically, more longer, long withstanding definitions of these placements so that we can get a good idea. So Taurus as the rising sign, and you have Venus and Sagittarius in the 7th house. So you're a pretty sensible and resourceful person. You'd like to be pretty grounded. And you may often be that person that people go to for advice. You may be people's strength or safe harbor. People see you as being someone very reliable and very dependable. And you are super consistent, and you have great endurance. Taurus people just have a resolve. Taurus rising people in particular, that's one of those, I'm trying to remember if it was our reading specifically where I was talking about how you layer your rising sign through these experiences you have within like your inner life and processing and getting introspective or trying things externally, all that sort of like culminates towards that rising sign. So for you, as you move through life, you're going to just have even stronger resolve. But the beautiful thing about Taurus rising people, because I'm one as well, again, we have a very similar chart. We have the same birthday, just different years. And we were born right around the same time. I was born at 2:02 p.m. So, with Taurus rising people, the beautiful thing about them is that they have such a resolve, but they have the ability to be vulnerable too, and it's such a rare gift. So you are gentle and soft, and this likely goes to your appearance as well. Now a lot of people like to joke that Taurus rising people tend to be, like bull-like in appearance or, stocky. And I know there are plenty of Taurus rising women that have a, like a thinner appearance, or like they're not bulky in any way. But because you have a lot of Scorpio and a lot of Sagittarius, you are probably on the shorter side. Well, actually Saturn in Aquarius, you may be average height. But yeah, you may have soft feminine features. Taurus rising women typically have larger lips. I don't, but typically they do. Usually a very soft face, usually very good skin and very good skin complexion. And yeah, they typically just come off ultra feminine, especially because you're a double Taurus rising. So you likely just have this ultra warm, feminine, sensual energy, and that extends to your appearance. Also, Taurus rising women tend to have very, very thick hair, and it tends to kink or wave. So a lot of times, Taurus rising kids can sometimes have, they could be the one curly-headed kid in the family, or the one kid that, just has that kinky hair and everybody else has like silky smooth, or, so it's almost guaranteed if you're a Taurus rising, your hair is going to be super thick or curly. It's very similar to Leo rising. But you love to be charmed. You love affection, even though with the Scorpio and Sagittarius 8th house, you may internalize a lot of that energy more. But you do, flattery will get you everywhere with a Taurus rising person. You can sometimes be stubborn and resist things. So you may be someone that needs to be convinced of things, or you may be someone that needs a lot of coercion in order to sort of trust somebody or get with the program, or, whatever language works best for you here. But you also are somebody that loves to be comfortable. I cannot stress this enough with Taurus rising. We absolutely need to be comfortable. And this is why Taurus rising, this is where their stubbornness comes in and their resistance to change, because they do not want to budge or move if they are comfortable. And oftentimes with the Taurus rising, they have to get to a level of such discomfort to actually make a change. I can't tell you how often this happens to me. Like I'll have want to make a change for months and months and months, and I'll just complain that I want to make this change, but I'm not quite uncomfortable enough yet to actually do something about it. And again, that also comes from having a lot of fire, a lot of water, right? You got to have like the motivation to do it. It's very hard to just like jump in and be practical for us, Taurus rising Sag sun people. So Sun in Sagittarius, you definitely at heart love adventure. Now, because your Sun is in the 8th house, you likely don't necessarily, I find that this was a struggle for me before I really knew about astrology, is that there's this assumption that all Sagittarius people just like want to backpack through Europe, and it's not really, well, you live in Europe, but for, here in America, that's always like the assumption is that like every Sagittarius person plays soccer, and every Sagittarius person loves to hike. And that's not usually the case. It's just that you love this explorative nature with the sun and Sag. So when it's in the 8th house, and also when you have a lot of Scorpio energy, this is everything's in the subtleties. So this adventurous energy of yours is very subtle, and especially with the rising in Taurus, you have to again be coerced or convinced to actually like go on a grand adventure, because you may be like Samwise Gamgee if you watch Lord of the Rings and you're just like, I'm just comfortable. You have to have like a desire or an attachment to someone in order to want to uproot your life. But you love discovery. You love to learn, especially about people. You love learning what makes people tick. That's probably why you got some interest into astrology, because, again, we have a similar schematic, and I love astrology for this reason, being able to delve into the nature of people. So you need a lifestyle that offers lots of opportunities for you to explore and discover things. So typically people with Sun in Sagittarius are eternal learners. It is never something that really ceases with them. They just feel this need to explore to the edges of a field or a topic and just absorb everything. They love getting to what they perceive to be some level of mastery of a subject. So again, perception is the key word there. But it's always a hard sell with a Taurus rising Sun in Sag, because you like a steady, consistent life, but that Sun will urge you to be more adventurous because you're still growing into that Sun throughout your life. But you value the journey of life. You love things that are interesting. You love seeing the potential in yourself and other people. Oftentimes people with Sun in Sag need to explore many different avenues, put their hands in many different pots before they pick a career that they feel is suited for them. And while typically a focus isn't a strong point for Sun and Sag because you have Mercury in Scorpio and the Taurus rising, I would say that you probably are better at focusing than others. But you sometimes may have to work on being a little more disciplined and working through a lack of motivation or a lack of emotional drive to do something. Typically Sun and Sag people, especially with the Venus there too, are very optimistic people. You are probably very good at finding the silver lining in life, and especially for other people. You also, Sun and Sag in the 8th, I've noticed with other ones I've met, we have a gift for seeing like the good in people, seeing like these things that people cannot see about themselves. And that can be good and bad, because you can sometimes see the bad in people, but Sag Sun, they often want to humanize people and they want to try to be forgiving and optimistic. So you, Sun and Sag in the 8th, people can often see people's red flags like right out the gate, but sometimes we disregard those because we want to think better of people. So that's something that you may have had a struggle with in life as well. However, with your Mercury and Scorpio, you may have got out of that habit of just automatically giving the benefit of a doubt, like to where you by pardon people that aren't deserving of that. You may have not been subject to that quite to the level that someone else may have encountered that issue that can happen. But yeah, you like to be playful, especially Moon and Leo in the 5th. You might really love games or anything that feels like a gamble or a risk. So one thing you gotta be careful about with Sun and Sag, Moon and Leo, you may have small addictions to things like, freemium games and stuff like that. And I know this is like a random thing to tell you, but it does, if that resonates with you, you'll find that does crop up into your life in other ways, and it might happen more than you think. But that's the thing. There's a little bit of a gambler spirit within you, to to where sometimes you may, out of nowhere, deviate from that fixed energy you have and take the risky choice just for the sake of taking the risky choice. But you're very open, direct, straightforward, especially in love, especially with affection. So you're not somebody that's going to be overtly affectionate with someone unless you truly feel that you want to be that way. So it's a really nice combination. But you enjoy friendship and associations, but a lot of those have to be very intimate. You are not a shallow person by any means, and that's what sometimes people can misinterpret about you when they first meet you, because being the Taurus rising person, Taurus people tend to be a bit materialistic. So people might presume right out the gate that you might be somebody that isn't all that deep or isn't a philosophical thinker, or you might take everything at face value. And your chart is very much like an investigator chart. Like, you need to dig into people. You need to have that closeness, that intimacy. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time staying invested in people. You'll always be good to people. You'll be cordial to people, but you'll be honest and real with people. But you're not going to give those best parts of yourself to somebody if they're not willing to expose themselves and get a little vulnerable with you and show that same level and desire for closeness as well. So again, Sun the 8th, intense experiences. So also Sun conjunct Mars. Let's talk about that. So people who have Sun and Mars conjunct are assertive, energetic, active, courageous. They tend to have a very strong physical drive. And because it is in the 8th house, this can be a very strong, high sexual drive with a certain level of expectation sexually. But this can also be that you have this inner, especially with Moon and Leo in the 5th, you may have like a bit of a competitive streak. And I would say that it could at times, if the moon were further back, like if it weren't at 29 degrees, it could be almost slightly unhealthy of a competitive streak. But I think you mean well when you are choosing to engage in that energy, if you will. And I think some of that competitive spirit comes from the fact that you can just see so deeply into things in a way that most people can't. So it may make you feel like you have like a leg up on somebody, or it may make you feel like you have more experience and you value experience very much. It's almost like a form of currency for people like us, or like it's a notch of worthiness for yourself and for other people. So you have Mercury in Scorpio here in the 7th. So this means that you love having exchanges with people. Again, it's all about the experience. So you could be someone that loves to discuss things or debate things, get really deep with somebody. You also may be a natural counselor. You may be someone who naturally is a good listener, who you feel valued if people open up to you and seek you for some sort of guidance. And you really love to have an affinity for talking to people who are intelligent, either on an equal level to you or more intelligent than you, because of that drive and that thirst for learning. But you also just appreciate someone bringing that level of knowledge to the table, because for Scorpio values hard work, and Scorpio values time and effort, fixed effort being put into something. So when someone displays a certain level of knowledge, it is a Mercury Scorpio person values the amount of time that was put in to get to that level of knowledge set. But Mercury and Scorpio also can work really well with their hands. So if you do have a creative streak with that moon in Leo, that could be something that has activated in your chart through like something you do with your hands. So sometimes this could be sculpting, or sewing, or crafts of some kind. But it could be carpentry, it could be cooking even with Taurus rising. But yeah, you definitely have, you value animals as well. Again, Scorpio tends to, and then also Saturn in Aquarius. So you tend to really, really value those who are less fortunate than you. Trying to, in a sense, value their worth, even if other people feel like they're not equal. So you may really value that misfit person, or you may really value people of like the LGBT community, because you feel that they have an equal right to have value and love, and animal rights as well. So Mercury in Scorpio does have a strong pull to those sorts of issues. But let's see. Okay, let's move on. Okay. I have notes here so that I stay on point because I am so disorganized. Okay, so Mercury and Venus, they are out of sign, but they are still conjunct. So you also have an appreciation for unique aesthetics. And I say this because the Taurus rising is very much sensory. So also with the Mercury and possibly working with your hands, and that creative streak in the 5th house, it could definitely be whatever that outlet is for crafting something or creating something that is like a tangible item. A lot of that may come through that Taurus need for sensory. So feeling like a soft blanket or a soft fabric, or the brightness of color. So you may be very, very sensory, and that's again why you may feel the need to fully immerse yourself into people and things, because it just feels more real. It feels more alive. It feels more adventurous. It feels like you're truly discovering something. So Mercury and Venus, you tend to be pulled towards just your own self-interest. So it might be harder for someone to coerce you into an interest you're not automatically drawn to, but this is very much an artistic placement as well when Mercury and Venus are conjunct, because there is a strong ability to create. And obviously we talked about Mercury. Pluto does create, again, that investigator sort of dynamic, and it gives you really super great focus. I actually think that this is a harmonic as well. I need to look at my notes on this other, I have a major life theme here that I'll show you. Because I think that you have a harmonic between Mercury and Pluto, but it does, you have the ability to super, super focus all of your efforts. And with that midheaven Capricorn, if that Neptune doesn't screw you too much, that you have the ability to really apply that towards any career field. But one thing that you have to sort of keep a note of is, while you can be careful, focused, methodical, and you have that concentration, you can just get wholly wrapped up into things and completely tunnel visioned, to where it's very hard for you to get out of something once you've committed to delving into it. So it can come out as a perfectionist issue, but it can also come out as, because you know that you have this issue and it's in the 7th, you might instead try to just draw other people into your life that sort of bring that energy for you. So you may get to the point where you get nervous about the idea of getting tunnel visioned into work, because you know how methodical you can be, or you know how you may feel like it has to get to a certain level to where you're satisfied with it. You may try to outsource people that have this kind of energy, or have this type of skill set, to where you feel they execute it better than you do, because you just don't want to deplete your energy like emotionally, right? With water, like you don't want to, you can become emotionally drained if you don't put the brakes on that. Um, but you can also be very cautious. You can be very suspicious of people, and very suspicious of certain situations that look like you don't have, well, that you don't have all the information, or you may automatically just think that's shady, like you may, it can sometimes with the Saturn square turn to cynicism very quickly. But because of that Venus, again, that does help a lot. At the end of the day, you'll always want to give second chances or give the benefit of the doubt. But that Saturn in Aquarius, and then, squaring this Pluto Mercury, you can just be very, you also can be very, very suspicious of people in authority. Sun, Sag in the 8th, hard Pluto squares, especially the Saturn, these are typically people who have issues with authority. They just, I hate saying it like this because I know it gets so overused, but this is like people who are like, destroy the patriarchy. Like it's like this like idea that people who are successful, that are of like an older generation, right? So I'm applying it to like our day in life right now. So it can be this assumption that people who are successful, they had to step over somebody to get to that place. So sometimes you may value, the close relationship or the connection or the present moment with the person over like achieving an overarching like goal, so you may sometimes get so focused on things that you sort of like forget about your own goals and ambitions because you get so wrapped up in the present moment, and there may be something about success that you struggle with accepting. Let's also talk about Moon square Mercury, because this is important too, and it's a pretty tight square. The moon is separating though, so this is good news. So when you have an aspect where it's like a square, and it's a separating aspect, this means that this is a problem that as you come into life with it, it's not urging your attention as much. It's something that will resolve, usually by like that first Saturn return, like especially for a square, right? So like around age 30, between 30, 35, maybe 40, the latest, you can get a good handle on the Moon square Mercury. But because I think you're turning 27, if I'm correct, it's something I want to point out to you still, just because you might still be working through Moon square Mercury issues. So again, you have you can be very selective with your interests, but there always has to be an emotional drive to evoke any action or interest from you, as far as particularly conversing with particular people or learning from people. So sometimes Moon square Mercury can come out of slightly narcissistic. I'm speaking especially because the moon in Leo. You could be somebody who, because you're so smart and you have so much knowledge and you're drawn to subjects you're already interested in, so you can kind of like set yourself up in this way. You may avoid subjects that don't interest you because you feel like you're not competent in that area. But when you close yourself off to those subjects, you make it to where you can never really be the student, if you will, right? Like you always come in with something to give. And what can happen when you're conversing with people sometimes is that you may sit there and wait for your turn to talk, just because you feel you get so much emotional supply from being able to talk or like have your turn to be present in the conversation or within the situation. And that emotional drive, like checking those boxes for like your emotional well-being and desires, it can cause you to sometimes not be fully considerate of other people. So you may be someone that sometimes can interrupt people in conversation, or waiting for your turn to talk, or feeling like the experience, the conversation, the class wasn't valuable unless you got something out of it. So again, that moon in Leo, it's at 29 degrees. So it can definitely be something that can really screw you sometimes. But I think again, it's just natural. This is natural human behavior. So it is something you can work on though. And you probably realize, you notice like, I have this habit where I always wait for my turn to talk. Like I just can't, sometimes I can't just fully be interested in somebody else. It always has to be, how can I retort or help this person through my own perspective or my own experience? Or because you're so good at investigating things, you can get to the root of a problem and help somebody by identifying that. But sometimes that person isn't ready for that, or that person isn't looking for that when they're conversing with you. So again, it can be very difficult because you have a very laser focused way, in a very abstract way of thinking, that just it can sort of narrow and niche down the types of friends or types of people you can have long withstanding relationships with, because they have to be able to engage with you in that way, and be very receptive to all that you want to give. But you also love to get really deep with people's pasts as well. You may be somebody that can very quickly get into people's traumas. And I don't think that so much is intentional. I think you just draw people like that to you. But you love hearing about other people's experiences because you love talking about your own experiences and what you've learned through your own experiences. So you love it when other people tell you their life story. And I'm the same way, so it's okay. But so Moon in Leo, we kind of talked about this. Very, very warm, super, super generous, but super sensitive. People don't give Moon in Leo people enough credit. I married a Moon in Leo person, and he seems wholly unsensitive and uncaring sometimes. He's got a lot of Aquarius though. But he is incredibly, incredibly generous of a person, and just incredibly loyal and devoted. And there's just so much warmth and there's so much values that they place on people, Moon and Leo people, but just super prideful. So you don't deal well with criticism, which is funny because of that Scorpio energy you have, that Sagittarius energy in the 8th house you have. You have gifts of diplomacy with the Mercury being in the 7th. So I do want to backtrack and say that I wouldn't say you're necessarily rude. You always want to be warm and diplomatic. You always mean well, right? But sometimes because that Mercury is close to that Pluto, it can just get away from you sometimes. And it is square that moon. But, I do feel like you really value people. And if you can get to the point where you see someone as family, even if they're not your family, you will be wholly, fully, completely devoted and loyal to that person. Moon and Leo people, when they commit to somebody in a relationship, they commit very hard. So, and they hate betrayal. They hate criticism, especially criticism just for the sake of being critical. Let's see. But yeah, you definitely have, there is a need for you to be emotionally validated and appreciated. That is definitely a huge love language thing for you, is someone directly showing or stating that they appreciate the things you do, that you're appreciated, and the reasons why you're appreciated or why you're valuable. And while you do love, a good story, you love a good drama, you're not really one for like emotional games or people playing with your heart. You have a lot of integrity and you extend that to other people as well. But yeah, again, very expressive. You may sometimes, in order to process what you're feeling, you may act it out or rehash it with people. But you can be childlike, playful. When you were younger, you might have been a bit naive. You might have been somebody that could get hoodwinked sometimes because that moon in the fifth, it can be very childlike. And this is, again, also moon in Leo can be very in the present moment, unless you have a lot of stuff like a lot of Aquarius or a lot of 10th house, or somewhat to where you're very, very forward looking, or like a lot of 9th house. Like the moon in the fifth is going to be very much like of the present moment, of the present journey. And Taurus, again, they like to be comfortable. They like to sit where they're comfortable. So they can plan, but they're not forward looking. They like to deal with things that are right in front of their nose. But one of the most important things I want to talk about in the chart, in your chart, so you also have moon opposition Saturn, but this is also separating. Okay, so this opposition's not that bad. However, the oppositions are more life sentences, if you will. So you'll be dealing with this aspect for the majority of your life, just constantly trying to balance it. But over time, it gets easier. So, and the thing is that Saturn will often overrule your moon in Leo, because the Saturn is in rulership and the moon is in fall, or not in fall, but it's not well placed. It's peregrine. So you often feel that you have to be doing something in order to receive approval or acceptance. So again, this is what I was talking about, where you may struggle with this idea of feeling valued, or you may struggle with authority, because you may feel like you have to achieve things to be valuable, but you also resent that idea because it requires a lot of work. It requires to put your own feelings on the back burner a lot of times when you're going to be successful, right? Like you have to give up a lot sometimes to be successful. And the moon in Leo wants to enjoy life. And the moon in Leo may have a lot of experiences of the past with your father or certain people who were an authority figure for you in life that created these, monumental memories, or these monumental experiences that really, really shaped your perception around this sort of thing. And also, you may just not be one that likes to conform or be a part of a group. You might just really like your own company, especially when you're able to be creative, or like those small groupings, or small, those one-on-one relationships. So you may resent the idea of having to blend within a group, because that might feel like work, or you may feel less valued. So you can be sensitive to criticism as well. The Saturn is the moon in Leo is already sensitive to criticism, and then the Saturn opposing that is basically compounding that even more. But at the end of the day, as much as you may resent groups, or as much as you may resent, the idea of having to achieve a lot to be worthy, at the end of the day, you very much want those things, and you very much want to be included. And because you're sensitive, sometimes it's just easier for you to try to avoid those opportunities, or those situations where you are invited to be a part of the group. You may put a lot of conditions on that, like you don't want to be a part of the group unless you can have some kind of leadership position, or unless you can help in a way, that you feel like you're using your skills. So you don't like to go in where you feel like you have nothing of value to bring. But again, this is also, you're probably one of those kids that had a few you had one or two true friends, and you didn't hang out with the big, large group a lot. You might have even been a little bit of a chameleon. I'm looking here in school with the Gemini, like on the 3rd. So you can blend in with people. You can talk really well. In fact, a lot of people may want to like bring you in a group setting, or like people may have some intrigue of the idea of you being a part of the group, but there's something within you, promised in your birth chart, that you have to work through. There's karma here, because Saturn is the planet of karma. So you have karma about groups. So if you believe in past lives, sometimes with Saturn, it's you were very easily integrated into a group, but you took advantage of that position. So now it's almost like there's this resistance now, and you have to sort of be able to work through and balance that and be okay being a part of the group and finding value just being in the group without having to necessarily call the shots, or, if things don't turn out well, that it's not a personal attack. It's about the work of the group. So I hope that makes sense. I know it was a lot to unpack. But you have also with Moon square Venus, you have a lot of conflicting emotional desires. And you may feel that you can't always depend on people. And this can sometimes very specifically relate to love. You may feel that for some reason, again, Moon deals a lot with childhood. So there's probably something from childhood that made you feel like, you just can't depend on other people. I love people. I love learning about people. I love the experience of being with people. And also the fourth house, the moon, the moon's ruling the fourth. This could be that you had some difficulties with your mom and your father, realistically. If I'm looking here, I mean, yeah, your father may have been distant, and your mother may have had a lot of expectations. Your mother may not have been as loving as you felt a mom should be, right? It was always about the next best thing, or what achievement can you do next? And that may have sort of triggered that Saturn even more. But pretty much if I had to take a guess, your mom, either it's your mom or the most nurturing parent. So this could be your father, but it's usually your mother. Your mom was really kind of the one, calling a lot of the shots in your life. And she may still be. So there is something to this. Maybe your mother and father were also very distant as a child. Like maybe they weren't really in love. And that sort of example of love made you feel that like you couldn't depend on a partner. And now, obviously, again, we were talking about how the squares, and this is an in-element square. So some astrologers don't count these, but I'm just making a note of it because I feel like it's something important, and it might really, really resonate with you because the Venus is in the 7th house, and that's really important. So it is definitely possible that this does ring really true for you. But I think especially because it's the same element, that you may still feel at the end of the day that like you still want that love for you. You just don't want a love that's like your parents, because if you have one that's like your parents, or whatever example it is you had earlier on in life, you're going to feel like there's almost no point. There's no value. There's no value to be achieved from this. And I don't want to be with somebody and lose myself in them. I really still want to be my own individual, because if I lose myself in a person and they're unreliable, right, then I've lost everything, right? And I value myself enough, and that might be if you've had self-worth issues, which with that moon, with what all's going on in that moon, I'm sure you have. If you have issues with self-worth, this has been a really hard thing for you to come to terms with. But I think you are coming to terms with it because, again, once you're getting towards like 30 and things like that, this is something that you're going to start being able to get past. But this is an applying square. So this is calling you more than the Mercury Pluto. This stuff is, you're resolving and moving away from that. It's an old problem, and it's going to remain an old problem in the past. But this one may crop up every now and again, the Venus moon. And there will be another astrologer that will sit there and tell you that, oh, well, you shouldn't count that because it's out of sign. And, that's fine. But I just figured because it's an orb, I wanted to bring it up. Okay, so anyways, I think I've talked a lot about your chart, and so I don't want I could go on for so much time, but I'm not really going to use the Cosmo because that just talks about placements in the chart, and we kind of already went over that. I do want to look at, and then we'll get into the transits and everything. Do you want to get into major life themes? Okay, so okay, yeah, you do have a fourth harmonic with Mercury, Saturn, Pluto. Okay, so it says you're very good at detailed work and can excel as a specialist in your chosen field of work. You have excellent mental concentration and you love to discover how things work. Because you focus so intensely on the object of your study, you sometimes miss general principles and concepts. You will succeed in areas that demand the specialized capabilities that you have to offer. So another thing, I would just want to look for anything else that has Pluto in it, because Pluto rules your seventh. And since you were asking about Pluto, I feel I want to get into Pluto. Okay, here we go. Oh, and this also is confirming. So your moon Saturn midpoint is right where Pluto is at 1 degree. And we'll look at your sun moon midpoint too, because you wanted to talk about what to look for as far as like a partner. What sort of aspects do you want to look for? Things like that. So we'll go over that. But it says you sometimes feel alienated and distant from others. You seek solitude, although too much distance from others can also bring on feelings of depression and loneliness. You need to find the right balance to make your life work. This will not be easy to achieve, but perseverance and confidence that the effort is worth it will repay you in the end. We also have Pluto's conjunct your Mars, Jupiter midpoint. You have big plans and the dynamic energy to manifest them. Sometimes you're almost obsessed with your big plans. Not surprising, Sagittarius, especially. Like, this wasn't even taking the sign into consideration, but when you add Sagittarius being your sun sign and your Mars sign, yeah, forget about it. But you sometimes become obsessed with big plans. Obsession is something else you might struggle with as well. With a lot of that 8th house energy, we can get very, very, very obsessive to where it can get unhealthy. So pointing this out is something important. Although family members and friends may tire of hearing of your plans, a single-minded focus on your goals is needed to achieve your goals. Be sure to research carefully before investing time, energy, and resources on a venture. And honestly, you're good at investing your time and investigating things, so I don't worry about you in that regard. You're good at promoting, marketing, and bringing things to a larger audience. You find ways to expand the exposure of a product or of bringing something to the attention of a larger number of people. You strive for success, and sooner or later you will achieve it. Let's see. Oh, Sun, Moon, Uranus is a 59th harmonic. You enjoy the company of people who, like yourself, are creative, humorous, inventive, and even slightly eccentric. You succeed in areas that give you lots of freedom where you can express your creativity. Avoid getting involved in organizations or groups that are too conservative, stuffy, or unresponsive to new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things. So again, that might also be the Saturn energy that you've come across, right? Like you've come to these groups that seem very innovative, that seem very new and striving for bigger and better things. And then you sort of get into them and it's all a facade. It's all like, you know, it's like, well, we care about animals or we care about people, like disenfranchised people. And you get in there and there's no love, there's no emotion. Like it's all a guise just to create a boys club. You know, you may have encountered instances like that. Okay, Moon, Venus, Pluto. You experience compulsive feelings and you can become romantically obsessed with another person. Feelings of jealousy, however, can destroy your relationship. Your feelings are very strong and you are inclined to project them onto others, at least occasionally. Your emotions are deep and complex. Okay, so, and again, I knew with that 29-degree Leo moon, that is going to be a big, two major things emotionally you'll have to think about and work on are your tendency to obsess about people and want to find out every, inner secret of their life. Again, we got to learn to humanize people and allow people to be individuals, because you seem to have this strong inclination of wanting to be an individual within a relationship, but sometimes we sort of lose ourselves in that, and we don't offer the same extension to the other person. And I've gone through this myself, and it's something I've grown out of. And I think you absolutely have every capability to do that too, because eventually the Taurus rising gets really tired and exhausted. It's like, nah, I'm good. I'm just going to be lazy. So the Taurus rising almost helps all that intense investigative, like deep dive energy of the Sagittarius Scorpio, because when you put those energies together, they are insatiable. So the Taurus rising is really nice, is a really nice way of being like, okay, well, I know I hit my limit, so I'm going to be lazy now, and I'm just going to enjoy my comfort. So the Taurus rising will help you a lot. So also looking at the nodes, South Node in Gemini in the first. Basically, this is really kind of just stating that you have this tendency to be reclusive. Sometimes you have this tendency to prioritize yourself over other people, because people who have South Node in the first have struggled with this, it's a dog eat dog world, or, you can only really defend for yourself, even though you're very loyal, right? But it's a struggle. The North Node being in the 7th is learning to be vulnerable enough to understand that in love, you're not always going to get like that fairy tale, deep love that's everlasting, lifelong, that in order to find that person, sometimes you have to get burnt. So that's a nodal issue that you're looking to work with and on. And again, the nodes are associated with the mother, so there may have been some dynamic here with her about maybe this inability for her to be progressive, this inability for her to actually want to seek the truth of things, and just being okay with what answers are being fed, or her being too valuing education more than anything, valuing a grade more than anything. So or like attributing value to how smart you are. So again, that might have kicked in that Mercury pretty early in life of, I have to be really smart. I have to super focus and be the smartest one in every subject. It's a lot. There's a lot of demand almost here with that, with dealing with these nodes here. So I wanted to go ahead and give you that disclaimer, if you will. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at, so here. So I was looking at the perfections for you. So this is a Hellenistic technique. And all you do basically is when you're looking, so when you're born, you have a first house perfection year, and then it goes to each house with each year. So when you were turning 1 year old, you had a second house perfection year. And then there's like these major aspects from the outer planets, or to that house, to the house cusp that happen. And so for instance, because you have a lot of stuff happening in the 7th house, and you have some planets up in the 10th, this is showing when the cusp of the first was being activated by a planet. Okay, so this is one of the first things I look at, because usually around the time when people are, sometimes people will get married at their second 7th house progressed. So it really depends on when you're born. I always forget what year that is. So yeah, like some people end up getting married really early between 18, 19, 20, because they've got the perfection year happening around that age, and it gets hit significantly to where that process either it ends on this when that house year, or the energy starts on that house year to where, the resolution comes when it's gets to the 9th/10th house perfection year. So I have a sneaking suspicion that this perfection year of the 7th house of 2023 is going to be that year that you'll get married or what have you. The cusp by perfection will enter Sagittarius, which is the sign of your sun. It will conjunct your node as well, the north one, sextile the midheaven, and conjunct Pluto. And Pluto rules your 7th house. Now, yes, we can look to Mars too, which was why I was looking at the cusp entering Sag. I thought that was very important to note that. So I know going into this, when I'm looking at transits now, I'm looking for stuff that's going to start lining up around progressing to the year 2023 or at the start of 2023 is when that is going to that energy is going to activate. So let's go to the progress chart first. So I'm just going to pull your secondary progressed as it is now. So right now, so the moon and the rising sign are two of the most important things to look at when you're looking at a secondary progress chart. Now, you have the rising at Gemini. So right now, by progress chart, and progress chart is basically the for every year, your sun moves a degree. So, and the chart, well, basically, let me put it this way. So see how it says calculated January 1st, 1994. So, for each year, it moves a day. So that's why currently you have a lot of Capricorn energy in your progress chart. So again, similar to the solar return, how I told you, that's kind of like a filter that the year is looking through or the energy is being expressed. Your secondary progress chart is sort of your response to external events happening in your life and how you're externally dealing with a lot of the energies playing out in your life. So right now you're in this uber like adulting practical mode of Capricorn. And I find a lot of people who have strong fire water energy charts, when they progress into Capricorn, they start to get really serious with themselves and they start to get very critical of themselves as far as trying to assimilate more into reality. Okay, so it happens a lot with Sagittarius people, and this is the Sagittarius person tends to have issues with commitment sometimes, tends to have issues with being realistic. They can be too fanciful. They can be too stuck in how they feel the world should be. And so when they progress into Capricorn, that's when they start trying to grow up. And so since yours is happening right around this age where you're starting to get towards 30, it just all makes perfect sense for me that this is a natural progression of someone who has Sagittarius energy. Just like someone who has a lot of Scorpio energy, when they progress into Sag, they start to not be so serious all the time, right? So having that Gemini and then the Mercury Capricorn in the 8th, I think that this is, you are probably really, really trying to hone a particular skill set. So that might be a big drive for you right now, is some sort of schooling or some sort of data collection so that you're really going out in the world and being more purposeful. And I think astrology is just a part of that. A lot of people, they see Capricorn as being like the skeptic, but to you, I think you are seeing it similar to me, where like, this is data, I can use, and I can weigh this with my life and see how accurate it is. But the moon is super important. So we have the moon in Leo, and it actually is about to make a return, like a progressed lunar return. So when this happens, you're feeling emotionally the most like yourself right now. As your moon progresses into Virgo, and then it's going to progress into the 5th, this might be your time where you start taking dating really seriously, because now you're going to start dating with the purpose of picking a long-term partner. So that moon takes about 2.5 years to move through a sign, and similarly 30 degrees of a house. So the moon will move to Virgo, and I can basically do this. So I can just look at when the moon is going to move to Virgo. Okay. Look at that. It's going to happen the day after your birthday is when that moon is going to move. Making sure I did that right. Oh, that did the transits. That's silly. Hold on one second. I don't know why I did that. Okay. Let me see. There we go. Okay. So March the 5th of 2021. I don't know why that just did that and did the transits. That's really silly. Okay. So yeah, March 5th of 2021 is when that moon is going to move out of Leo. Okay. So this was sort of like when the moon is still in Leo, that's going to be still time focusing on yourself. I'm very, very curious though of it moving into the 5th as well. So March 5th of 2021, your progressed moon is going to take on the I guess the badge or the brooch, I don't know, it's a random way of saying it, of Virgo. So much more service oriented, much more wanting to give than receive. And it's in the 4th, so this could be more of giving to your own self. I think so long as that moon stays in, the 4th, that's not going to be quite the time for either marriage or meeting somebody. So I want to see when it's going to move to the 5th. So let me see. Okay. I just want to see. Okay, so your birthday next year is when it's going to move to the 5th. So it actually makes sense, because this could be you meeting somebody a year from your birthday. And then that would give you another 2 years until that perfection year activates. And look at that moon. Like, that moon is like getting, by progressed, you're having one of the best peak years of your life next year. So by progress chart. And you're also the ruler of your 7th, Pluto, is getting hard activated by Saturn, and you're going to be getting closer to your Saturn return at this time too. So when this happens, I think this is going to be that around that time, that meeting is going to happen. So if that means anything for you, and I'm trying to remember when we were talking about your solar return, I can go back to it really quick, because I didn't see a lot romantically happening, I think. But yeah, that Pluto, anything that activates that Pluto is what I'm keeping my eye on. So I see that that's a pretty big, and yes, technically that square has been happening, already. Like we know that square has just kind of been happening for a minute now, but that moon is still a timing method. So I want to make that clear too. The moon is a timing method in astrology. Let's go to, because another thing that usually happens is by transits. Okay, so I have your natal. So I'm going to do natal transit. So I just want to see when any of the outer planets are going to hit Pluto. So we got Pluto natally being at 26 degrees. And again, usually it's something more than your sun. And we also want to look for anything that's going to hit Venus. So luckily, when one of these things is going to hit, you have so many planets grouped right here. So it'll be a little bit easier to spot when something's going to happen. So again, we already know you've got the Saturn square happening. Typically though, you will have usually a hard activator, meaning like a hard aspect, and then you'll have some sort of softer aspect happening. So transiting Pluto is moving towards a square to your natal Pluto. That is a possibility of being another activator because Saturn will move into Aquarius. Actually, I'm being silly now. That is not quite squaring you yet. So the Pluto, though, let's see. Yeah, because the Pluto will trine when it goes into Pisces. It's way too late. Okay. Neptune. We've also had Uranus. Okay, Uranus may be the best timing method because it takes about 7 years to move through a sign. So we're probably about 2 years into Uranus right now because Uranus went into Taurus in like 2018, I believe. So I'm actually curious when we look to win Uranus. I just want to look to when Uranus gets to position. Okay, so when Uranus is Taurus, and you'll have to forgive me, I like cold read these charts a lot, so like I just sort of, I just go by what I don't get it right the first time sometimes. Okay, so Uranus will oppose in 2024. So we were talking about 2023 being a strong activator time. So that might be the engagement possibly in 2023 with 2024 being a marital time. But let's go back again. Okay, so and then I'll also talk about, I know you wanted to talk about like what to look for. So I'll tell you exactly what to look for. Okay. Let's see. You had you're going to have a nodal opposition happening here soon. When does that happen? Sorry, I'm looking. Yeah, this software can be pretty cool sometimes. Okay, so we also, oh, and look at that. Okay, South Node conjunct transiting Venus. It is going to be on top of your North Node. Also, right around that time when that moon is going to move into Virgo by your progress chart next year. So between October and December of this upcoming year, so obviously not this with next, that is when to look for somebody. Just to look for someone in your environment that's going to come through. Also, let me go back. Vertex is a very important planet when we're looking, looking to fated encounters. So you could draw in somebody during a time of Libra as an initial meeting. Now, let's see. This could be, I'm trying to think of what could be happening around that, to where Libra could be a transit happening by October, December next year. Or they could have something at Vertex 13 degrees. So I'll give you an example. And these are fated life relationships of any kind. And that doesn't mean like forever, but like a fated relationship that you're meant to have. And obviously anyone you're going to marry or have a deep relationship with is going to activate your vertex or the anti-vertex somehow. So my daughter, for example, has, I think my vertex is like, it's either 13 as well or it's 18. I think mine's 18 Libra. Her Venus is exactly almost to the minute on my vertex. My husband's vertex is right on top of my vertex. So that's something to look for too. If you get with somebody who they're anti-vertex, so if they have a vertex in Aries or Libra and it's on top or opposing, that's a strong indicator too. But let's see. So we talked about timing with that. I also want to talk about what to look for. And I know you said it's not, I know you were saying like, oh, it's not as cut and dry as you can tell me what aspects would be good. You're right. I mean, it would be very difficult to do that. But I can definitely tell you, what signs are going to be harmonious with you. Now, granted, usually what you end up getting is like, you never know, right? Okay, so I also have Scorpio on the descendant at 2 degrees Scorpio. So my rising's at 2 degrees Taurus. I ended up pulling, so one aspect that could work really well, one thing to look for relationships that are really significant is when your angles are close. So, and usually this is by conjunction or opposition. So I married a man who is also a Taurus rising and also has his descendant in Scorpio. This lineup works really well because oftentimes when one person gets hit by a major ascendant transit, the other one does too. So when you're going through things together, they happen very organically, very naturally. When you have the inverse, if one person gets hit, the other person's also getting hit, but in a different way. So they can support and feed off one another, if you will. So you could possibly draw in somebody who has a Scorpio ascendant to your Taurus ascendant. And that's usually what astrologers will say is like, oh, well, your Scorpio's on the descendant, which is the house of partnerships. So you're looking for a Scorpio man or whichever sexual orientation you are. I always just off the base presume that, I presume heteronormative relationships unless you tell me otherwise. So I'm going to presume for now that you're looking for, a heteromantic relationship. So yes, that is definitely a big indicator. But to be honest, my husband gives off a lot of Scorpio energy, but he only has Pluto in Scorpio, which obviously everyone within a 12-year time span has Pluto in Scorpio. But he has a packed 8th house. So you have to look at the house position too. So you could draw somebody in who's similar to you, has a lot of 8th house energy. So that way they're fulfilling the Scorpio energy that you're looking for, because you really want to bring in someone who's super intense, someone very intelligent, but someone very freely loving with you, and someone who doesn't have traditional views on relationships and love. So if you come from a culture or a family where you guys have arranged marriages, you may be somebody that wants to marry for love, and you'll draw in a partner that wants that too. Because the North Node is also usually your destined point. And to be honest, with the moon in the 5th, in, the Saturn, Neptune, there's a couple of placements here that kind of show like you are going to contemplate in your life going away different than your family, because you don't have a lot happening in the 4th to where that's of a lot of importance to you, is like following in the footsteps of your family. So you definitely may feel the need to sort of branch out and kind of do something different. And then let's see. So again, you're looking for someone, you probably you would want to draw into a specialist as well. So you have the tendency in your own chart to be a specialist in a field, but you'll probably want that in a partner as well. You're also probably wanting somebody who already has a good amount of experience and resources and his own wealth acquired, because to be quite honest, your husband or the person that you're going to be with is going to bring in a substantial amount of your combined wealth. So that's really important to you as well, is that you have somebody that is sort of substantiating an area of life that you feel you lack in for some reason. And this is not to say that you can't make your own money or your own resources, because you can definitely with part of fortune in the 10th. You absolutely have the ability to make money in your career, but it's so close to Uranus that it's going to be very hard for you to control that happening. You're going to have to just kind of wait for like a major Uranus transit to hit. Now that could happen when Uranus, the transit Uranus here in Taurus trines this here, which is going to be in about like 2-3 years. So again, right around the Saturn return, right? That's when we're starting to get and it could be now because you've had Saturn going back and forth over this part of fortune here. So it is possible that you're already starting to bring in a lot of wealth, but maybe that is a slight bit of tradition that you keep where like you really do want him to bring in more of the money. Let's see. So we also want to look to Mars too. So you also will want to look for someone who's pretty easygoing, someone who is decently healthy, athletic, but not necessarily like trying to be, just somebody that typically has a little more energy than you do, because you're someone that can be very stagnant, to where it's nice for you to bring in a little bit of that opposite of a man who's energetic, someone who gets you excited to get up and go and do things. So I have a feeling, just based on what I'm seeing, is like, even though you want to bring in somebody who can be very deep and serious, at the same time, you want somebody who can sort of knock you out of a rut of a mood and sort of excite you about the day, or someone that can motivate you, be your cheerleader, right? Because that's a really big Sagittarius Leo thing too. Like you can be people's cheerleader, you know, but you really want that in a partner too. But yeah, someone who's very active, someone who likes to stay busy, someone who's always thinking about the next best thing. So someone really ambitious. So, and I know you're probably thinking, you know, some people may think like, oh, well, this is just, you know, this is just, isn't this what any woman would want? And it's like, no, not really. Not really. You'd be surprised what some people want. But you also want someone that can be slightly possessive of you. So I think for you, even if you've struggled with the idea of marriage, at the end of the day, I think you feel like the relationship isn't going to have legs unless they commit to marrying you. But you need somebody that will advocate and defend you as well. So you need that, really what this man is going to be like. Again, it's very similar to my husband just because our charts are so similar. So you're definitely looking for a man who ultimately is a pretty private person. Not the type to talk, you know, a lot about your relationship publicly. Someone who values the intimacy and the privacy of your relationship. You're looking for somebody who values marriage or values commitment. You're looking for somebody who has a bit more energy than you do day to day, because sometimes you can have the tendency with the Mars being in the 8th to get exhausted rather easily, or to be difficult to get up and motivate. So again, you want somebody that's going to be able to motivate you, and somebody who has a lot of their own ambitions and that will sort of motivate and inspire you to get creative and be ambitious as well. You also likely would want somebody who would want to make a mother of you with the Pluto square the moon. Now, I do want to stress, because the moon, now you naturally, I don't know if you have children now, I'm assuming you don't, but you naturally will be a great mother. But parenthood will create some struggles for you and the marriage itself, because I think you and this potential person would have some disagreements on parenting styles. And also your child may naturally rebel against you. So I see this happen sometimes with this particular type of placements with the 5th house, or like Leo strong charts for women. Sometimes their children can be a little rebellious. So it's just something to keep in mind, that going into parenthood is something you two should be absolutely ready for when that time comes. And if you want, if we do another service down the road, we can look at like pregnancy and look at like when would be that time that you could or would have a baby. So, you know, I really do think it's going to be right around 2021 2022, that a relationship that, where you're dating for a while and, maybe you move in together between 2022, 2023, I think that would be the engagement or preparation for a marriage. And then between 2023 and 2024 would be the actual marital year happening. I definitely think 2023 is what to aim for, probably early 2023, like by spring. Probably not much later than spring of 2023 is what I'm seeing personally, just looking at your chart. So I don't know. It got so dark in here. Okay. Okay. So yeah, wow. We're an hour and 20 minutes. So that is, that should be a good amount of information for you to work with. I'm sorry if I repeat a lot of things. It's just, you have a very interesting chart. So I have fun looking at it. But yeah, definitely. I think at this peak point of your life, the relationship and finding the partner is the big thing right now. I think the work stuff is going to just start unfolding organically. But we can go back and look into that too if you feel like you wanted me to look into that a little bit more. But because you specifically asked about the relationship, I wanted to go ahead and talk about that. Let me know if I wasn't clear either on what about the partner, what to look for. I know you're talking about, let me look at one more thing. I'm sorry. So let me look. So you were talking about aspects, like what sort of aspects to look for. So you want to try to avoid squares to these as much as possible. So you could pull in someone that's got a lot of cardinal energy. So you could pull in someone and honestly, if they're a little bit older than you, they're going to have a lot of that Capricorn from the Capricorn generation. And that will sextile the Scorpio. So Capricorn energy is good. I would definitely look for someone maybe a little bit older than you so you can get some of that nice trine action happening, especially to Jupiter. Jupiter represents the husband. So someone that's got some placements. When I was born, I was born at the very, very end of 89 into 1990. So someone that's around 3 years older than you or 2 years older than you is going to have Uranus trine sextile pretty much exactly the Jupiter in Scorpio. That will be a really, really nice placement, a really nice activator if you can get something like that. Obviously, the older you go, so if you go into like 1988, you're going to get the Uranus, Neptune here right on your Mars. You're going to get Saturn all the way back here too. And you'll get their Mars also, depending on what time of year they're born. You can get their Mars in Scorpio, or you can get their Mars sitting here in Sag as well. And the Mars energy, I think, would be good. Mars is definitely an important energy to have from him. So I would definitely look for somebody that's going to have their Mars is going to activate or bring more energy to your Mars or your Sun or your Mercury, something like that. So you'll want to look for, these nice like trines. And of course that's difficult because if you get some of the Aquarius energy, it's going to trine all the Sag, but it's going to start squaring this. So probably the earlier signs of Aquarius would sort of avoid some of this. And honestly, if you get a square, like a Jupiter square, it's not the end of the world because Jupiter is benefic regardless. So let's see. So your moon's in Leo. So obviously people say the trine is like the moon sign to go for. I've actually done a lot of research on this regarding marriages. And yes, that is an aspect that happens. I have found, and I swear on my life, the sextile is one of the best aspects to have for the moon. The sun-moon conjunction is okay. People say it's really good. People say the moon-moon conjunction is really good too. But I think that you'll emotionally be too similar to where I would almost rather you get somebody with like a moon in Pisces or a moon in Cancer to nicely trine this. Or a moon in Aries. because that could be someone that could be very nurturing with you, but you have to watch out for that moon falling in your 12th. Also, the moon on Taurus would be really, really nice, a really nice calm energy. They can be kind of possessive too. And they would very much identify emotionally with you a lot. So, I mean, a guy with a moon in Taurus, or if you get, let's see, a sextile to your moon. So, you know, a moon in Gemini could work. You know, a moon in Scorpio would work really, a moon in Libra, especially if it's near this vertex. That's definitely where you want to go. Someone's moon on your sun could be really nice too, but you'd have to be very careful with your influence on them because their moon would start falling into your 8th house. And so if they're not a Taurus rising too, to where they have that natally, that's a difficult position for their moon. But yeah, I think Mars is definitely something you want to focus on. Venus as well. So his Venus should have an expectation that works well with your chart. So he should probably have Venus in a fire or an air sign because your moon sign is in a fire sign and so is your Venus. So basically, I don't know if you want to write notes, but definitely you're wanting to look for a lot of sexual energy. You're wanting to look for a lot of the masculine signs, so the air and the fire signs. The moon would be really nice if they had a water moon to sort of help activate that 7th house stuff. But the sextiles for your moon would work really well too. So if he has moon in Libra or moon in Gemini. Now you would want to be careful though, because the Gemini moon should probably be closer to here, because if it's on the south node, he could hold you back from doing things you want to do. So honestly, you're really going to want to look more towards like the moon in Gemini, or go for one of the trines. So go for the moon in Sag, the moon in Aries, but the moon in Sag would definitely be better. Especially if it's in those the early degrees of Sagittarius before 9 degrees. Also, somebody that can help you process your Saturn stuff. So again, a guy that could have some nice sexual energy from Sagittarius or from Aries. Especially, yeah, something in Aries that could help you process the subconscious stuff you've got going on with that Saturn would be really nice. Also the trines. So you're looking for a lot of fire and air stuff, but just enough water to where he can have the deep attachments and he can be vulnerable and intimate. So I don't know if that makes any sense. Okay, but I think that does it, Sabrina. So let me know what you think. And email me. We can discuss. And then I'll talk to you soon. Okay, thanks. Bye.